Hello, friends. I'm Luis Palacios. I'm here with Federico, and we're going to get to know our fellow class member today. So I have a couple of questions and a few things that I wanted to talk to him about. First of all, I know you live in Mexico City, and I understand that's where you were born, and you're basically a native of that city. Is that true?
Yeah, I've been living most of my life here, so I'm really used to all the chaos in this big city.
Would you describe Mexico City as chaotic
Yeah, in many ways, yeah.
because of traffic or the number of people or?
And all the uncontrollable uh, um, feelings people just transmit to each other. Like sometimes it's overwhelming to see them fighting in traffic
Mm.
or things like that.
And I'm curious about your perspectives on that. I mentioned earlier that me and my wife like to go to Mexico City. We've been doing it every year. It's one of our favorite places to visit. Um, my wife's just fell in love with the city, but of course, it's a big, huge place. In fact, the last trip we actually rode around in a cab and began to appreciate just how just mind-blowingly big the city is. But where we go, it's usually a couple of neighborhoods, right? Condesa, Roma, and my impressions, and I'm only seeing a tiny little bit of the city. I understand that, but our impressions of the city is that it's very peaceful. The first time we were there, obviously it's very, it's incredibly crowded. A couple of times that I've driven through the city it was terrible, right? Just all this traffic and it takes forever, right? But um, but when you're within a particular neighborhood, like it's very wooded. There's a lot of trees. I remember waking up to the sounds of traffic, but it was of cars. You could hear cars moving, but it was mostly birds. What I could hear was birds. It was trees and birds because of all the trees and stuff. But um, but obviously you've got a better perspective on the city. I mean, I'm there just a few weeks a year. So it's interesting to hear that's how you view it. And a couple of times we got stuck or we got caught in rush hour traffic in the metro, and we were there right before they started separating the cars. Like they separate women. They have cars with for only women,
Okay, yeah.
and or I guess we heard. I mean, we were there. I think before we were a little concerned about getting split up. Um, so maybe we haven't seen the worst of the metro traffic, but we've been there when it's been pretty crowded. Um, so you were born there. You went to school, high school, all that stuff was all in Mexico City.
Yeah, except for a year that I studied in New Orleans. So apart from that, yeah, I've been studying here, living here, and enjoying life here.
I
So
go ahead. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
no, I like the thing you said about the trees. I believe it's fairly green, like for a big city. Like it has a lot of trees, and I like that.
Yeah, I think part of it. I think is it's such an old place, and I think that's the other thing. That's the other aspect I think that people don't realize, that it and being such an old place, there's trees take a long time to grow. So to have some of these avenues with these massive trees, it's because they were planted a long time ago. But that's also I think part of the appeal and the charm. It's this mix of ultra modern with very old, buildings, I guess back to colonial Spanish times almost, right? So so that's really pretty. And yeah, I mean for us, and that's our impression, it's surprisingly green, Mexico City, and pedestrian friendly. There's big, huge avenues, and So, but again, this is all based on a couple of neighborhoods. It's just Roma and Condesa. So
Yeah, that part of Mexico is well thought up for pedestrians and people, bikes and everything like that. But most of the city is not well think structurally. So
it's a built for cars, like or
not even that. Like sometimes just because it's not well designed. There's so much traffic everywhere. Like sometimes streets just get into two two roads, or like only a car can pass sometimes through a big avenue and things like that. So
And I don't. I imagine in Mexico, it's grown. Mexico City has grown organically, like a lot of the old cities have. So in the United States, there's two types of cities. There's places like Boston, where like a cow path became like a city, became a road. So it's not always very well organized. It grew organically, and it wasn't like there was this plan, right? They weren't thinking about cars, right? Nobody was thinking of it. Just kind of that's how the city developed organically. And then there's places like LA where it seems like there was more, things were laid out on a grid, or it was with the car in mind. Although LA is still a mess, but um, so is that what happened? Is that what you're describing in Mexico? It's just kind of like it grew
yeah,
organically, right? Or I imagine, I don't know.
yeah, probably is that like it grew organically. So roads are not well structured or designed.
Yeah, and maybe one of the things we want to do next time we're there is explore a little more, But so I'll ask you for some tips from you next time. In fact, if you had a visitor visiting from another country, where in Mexico City would you take them? What are some things that tourists probably might miss out on, do you think?
Uh, that's a hard one because um, I really like getting out of the city, not staying here.
So,
uh,
well, that's fair. So when you get out of the city, where do you go?
no, but I mean, my interest is like going to the near forest I have here. So that is a beautiful place to see the city from above. And it's like an hour hike. So it's not that much. Also good places. Uh, I think going to downtown, it's a nice experience. Um, yeah, I don't enjoy like really crowded places, so I stay away from them. But Mexico City is full of really nice museums,
Mhm.
so there's lots of things to do, and there's infinite museums to see.
Yeah, somewhere I read that it's got I think only Berlin has more museums. It's like Berlin and then Mexico City in terms of the number of museums. And so and that's one of the things that, well, I guess in a place that big, that the other thing, it's not just big, it's dense. So even within just the Condesa, there might be like we might spend 10 days in just in that neighborhood, and we're still finding new restaurants or new little, popsicle places or whatever, or just hidden in every corner, right? So, and the same thing with museums. So this we're on the phone, it's like, oh, like there's a museum to well, all kinds of things, kids museums or a museum of. There was one museum of industry, which was interesting because it was. We learned a little bit about the history of Mexico City. Um, how like I guess a lot of the French when they were immigrating, so there were a lot of French. They set up a lot of the textile industries. The
Mm.
British were setting up mining. The Germans were setting up beer industries, and they weren't really mingling in the beginning, and then I guess people in there mingling more. So that was like one museum. We just walking. It's like, oh, there's like this beautiful building, right? It looked ancient, but it was a museum run by the government. I think it was free, or it might have been free for like residents, and I think we just walked in. So
Yeah,
that's so you like the outdoors? You like hiking? You like do you go camping, stuff like that?
yeah. Like from 3 years ago, I'm spending my weekends going outdoors, or because I'm into climbing a lot.
Oh, okay.
Uh, it's most of my, well, it's a big uh, time consuming or time spending into climbing. So I was there like a few hours ago, so climbing. So
So I mean, these are like, and I don't know that
climb,
I don't know much about climbing. I mean, like I know that they have gyms with walls, or you're doing it
yeah,
in actually like
exactly.
in rocks, or you were at the gym.
Yeah, at a gym. Weekends I use it for rock climbing on the outdoors.
That's pretty cool,
But
man.
yeah,
And then, I mean, so how does the rock climbing outdoors work? Is it where, you're just finding natural footholds and climbing up where there's kind of a rocky wall, or are you using ropes, or?
where this there are many types of climbing, but sports climbing and bouldering are the two things I like. Sports climbing is where you use a harness and a rope, and bouldering is just like a crash pad you take with you and put it where you think you're gonna land if you fell.
Wow.
So boulderings tend to be not too tall to climb,
Okay.
so you don't get hurt, but there are big chances you get hurt. So
And how did you get started in rock climbing?
um, since I was little, I climbed all the trees where I lived. So from there, I when I saw a climbing gym, I couldn't stop. I couldn't pass the opportunity to go and climb it. And just a few years ago,
Uh, you
I
know,
really took it.
sorry, pardon me.
Yeah,
The kid.
yeah, no
So
problem.
you were a kid, you were climbing. Sorry for the interruption.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I was climbing everything I saw with my brothers, and yeah, well, just a couple of like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I I decided I was gonna do more climbing, like um, more often, and yeah, like I kind of rediscovered it, and I knew it was my favorite thing to do. Like, so it was a good finding, and it helped, like, just to. It was nice to find that thing I really liked, and I didn't knew about it before. So now I'm spending the time I like to do it and to become a better climber. Yeah,
That's awesome, man. You have a group of people that you go climbing with, or
yeah. I have a group of friends that are kind of in the same level as me. So it's nice to yeah have that group of friends that kind of understand that part um, of what I like to do. So yeah, about friends, I have lots of old friends that now I don't relate to them that much. Like I cannot find. It's hard to me to socialize with them. Like the things they talk about are not interest to me anymore. So I'm.
starting when, or what changed in you that you felt this disconnect with your friends?
It was uh, around 2 years and a half, or yeah, 2 or 3 years. Um, one of my brothers died
Oh my gosh.
on September 2015.
Oh, I'm sorry, man.
Yeah, no, and from there, I kind of rethink my life and kind of told myself I wanted to be better in every way. So I stopped doing lots of things. I changed changed lots of things, like what what I'm eating. I I stopped doing things I considered they weren't doing good or giving me something uh, worthy or useful. So from there, it was a big changing period of my life, and it still is. So, but I'm happy I found tragedy and hope because it has taught me a lot of. It has given me like a wider perspective of what's out there and how can I be prepared for getting what I want, like, or my objectives, or uh, yeah, many things. So I'm really grateful for finding it, and yeah, other aspects also, like my diet or um, my mind. Like I've been uh, kind of learning a lot about myself. So I think I have more control about everything that surrounds me, or even thoughts I can. I mean, I was kind of a mess before, so it was a difficult transition to be able to put like structured thoughts or conscious thoughts, to be present, to be aware. It's kind of something hard to believe once you're like aware that other people aren't, but I used to be that like that, so I'm kind of, yeah.
No, that's fascinating. When you said you no longer identify with some friends, I've had the same thing happen. For me, it was a result of what I was learning with Tragedy and Hope, or becoming red pilled in general, right? Realizing that the world doesn't work the way most of us assume that it works, and I started drifting away. And I can't stand what a lot of the conversations that most people have, like at work. A lot of it seems trivial nonsense, or I feel they're caught up in the theater of politics. They think it's real, and it's hard for me to take it seriously. Um, but that's I mean, to me, you look like a young guy. You're younger than me anyway, and I think I'm in my 40s, and it feels like it's only recently that I started forging my own path in life, right? Like they say. So I wish I'd started earlier. So I guess in that sense, I think that's awesome that you know you've um, decided to take charge and take a look at your life and what it is that you want, and maybe appreciate what we do have, and maybe not wait. I feel like I did waste a lot of this very precious life, right, that we have. That's very brief. I'll tell you, my dad, he I think started taking his health very seriously only recently, only after he got sick. And because he actually told me, I got into health. It's weird, man. I was a smoker. I drank too much, and then somewhere along the way, I became a health nut, right? Like at work, you
Mm.
think of me as a health nut. I think I quit smoking a long time ago, and I try to watch my diet. So my dad was telling me like, oh, it's so great that you started early, because he didn't really start looking after his health until it started failing, as an old man. So
Mm.
you're even way ahead of the curve, man. That's great. Um, and it's funny you say that. I had lunch with an old friend today. We've been friends since we were in junior high. I met him shortly after I moved to the United States. So I was whatever 10 when I met him. We're still friends, and but I'm realizing what a distance there is now between me and him, where we're at. I was trying to share some information, and I've had this frustration in the past couple of years. We're drifting apart. Um, so I try to tell him something about the Federal Reserve, or maybe don't take that back, don't take that shot, or think about this medicine. Like, look, I actually spent 10 minutes. I went to PubMed, and look, I don't know, man. This medicine sounds like garbage to me. Here, but he can't get to the point where he can like disobey a doctor. Right? He can't like it's this lack of faith in your own ability to figure things out. I think the doctor says, but my doctor. Yeah. So today I was bringing up some stuff regarding diet, and I realized it sounds so true, right? It's just stimulus response. Like I started mentioning something that sounded surprising to him, and he started just getting upset and immediately he didn't even finish. I think I couldn't even finish speaking or saying a sentence, right? Because immediately he was like, "Well, what about this?" and that doesn't sound right. Clearly, just it was just emotion, right? It was an emotional response, and I realized to what extent his actions in life are being guided by feelings. So I've struggled with integrating the trivium. It's something you mentioned, and I'm also interested in studying it. There's this idea of having kind of this antivirus, right? That's constantly running. I always thought that sounds great, but how do I integrate it, right? And maybe it's happened over time, slowly, bit by bit. Because when I look at my friend and I see, we grew up together, and there didn't used to be this chasm between us, but now there is. And then I think about how I used to react when people would tell me something that was surprising. I used to get upset, or it was just emotional. So,
Yeah.
um, and that kind of so that's awesome, man. And I've also I think a lot of us like experienced the tragedy and hope and the Peace Revolution podcasts that have had a big impact on us.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
so, but I want to ask you this. I'm really curious. So when I first found out about the trivium, no one's ever heard of the trivium in the United States, right? But I asked my dad, right? It's like, hey, Dad, have you heard of the trivium? And his response was like, of course. You know, of course. I mean, how can you call yourself educated if you haven't heard the trivium? It's like, what the fuck? And is it taught in Mexico? And he said, what he told me was like, well, he wasn't aware of it being taught as like one class. Here's a class on the trivium. But he thought, that the individual subjects were still taught, except rhetoric. Rhetoric was now moved out of high school and more into college. But that there's still, logic is still taught and grammar, like these two aspects. Now, I don't know. My dad's he's a professor of philosophy in Mexico.
Hmm.
So, like, okay, well, maybe he's kind of in a cocoon, right? Because but I thought his reaction was funny, right? Like, of course, the trivia. It's like I asked him if he knew arithmetic or something. It's like, of course I know what the trivia. He's like, well, shit, this is a big mystery to me. I had to find out about it from the internet. So, are these ideas better known in Mexico? You think? Like, had you heard of the trivium before, or no?
No, I've never heard of it, but I mean, I was a lousy student. Like, I wasn't a good student. That's maybe part of why I'm here. So I wasn't easily um, indoctrinated, or
Right? Yeah.
so. Um, I remember I had like one semester of, well, one class in one semester where they taught me some logic, and
I tell you, that's a hell of a lot more than people get here, at least in my experience, at least in public school in California. Not even in college
yeah,
did I get any logic.
yeah. Well, apart from that, rhetoric. I learned about it like many years, like maybe even like when I approach the first time Tragedy and Hope.
Okay.
So um, yeah, and grammar. I remember some stuff, but like because it wasn't organized, I didn't relate it to something. And also I remember I had it doesn't have to do with what we're talking, but um, I had a class only one semester about public speaking.
Oh, okay.
So it didn't help much, but it did. Yeah.
Well, and there's other ways of breaking the trivium, right? It's enough that they teach it. They can teach you the subjects, but if they teach it out of order, or if they leave one part out, it's not as helpful.
Yeah.
Um, But if you want, you know, my dad recommend when I told him I want to study the Trivium, he recommended a bunch of stuff, a lot of books. They're in Spanish,
Okay.
so so I bought them, you know, and but anyways, I can recommend some stuff.
Yeah,
In fact, there's
definitely.
even a couple of them that I haven't been able to find in English, right? So there's some really nice editions on philosophy that he told me about that I tried to get in English to give to friends here, but I couldn't find the exact title, right? So
Mhm.
maybe they exist under, I don't know, a different collection or something. But um,
Yeah, I'm interested on those books. I mean, for some reason, I rather read in English,
oh, okay.
but I'm okay if they're good books.
Yeah, there was one really pretty one on Stoicism, the philosophy of Stoicism that he gave me as a Christmas present. And anyway, yeah, it was really pretty. And maybe there's some nostalgia for me too. Like I like reading in Spanish when I can. Um, and again, I don't know if it's my dad's bias or not, but apparently, like Spanish is it's a good language to study logic in. There's something about how Latin and the Romance languages are structured. So um, uh, maybe there's too many ambiguities in English, and you have to spend a lot of time defining stuff up front. There's just too many homonyms and words that sound the same and that have
Hmm.
multiple meanings or whatever. But for what it's worth. So no, that's fascinating, man. Yeah, we can exchange notes. I feel like I've been working at the same thing, Federico. Like, how do I integrate the Trivium? So I decided I was
Yeah.
going to start with logic, um, and there's yeah. Well, it's funny. Memorizing logical fallacies was useful. I started recognizing them. You know.
Yeah, it happened to me too.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Yeah. So yeah.
Hmm. Like, I don't know a bunch of them, but I can recognize some of them. And I haven't spent much time on them, but I'm really interested in them. And even saw a video about all the fallacies Trump can say in one speech or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably a good place to start. And then I asked my dad, like, I want to study logic. Where do you start? So I'll start from the beginning, you know, and go to the Aristotle, you know.
Mhm.
So I found a book called Aristotle for Everybody. Might have been Adler. I don't know who wrote it. It's an old book, and it's funny because in the beginning of the book, he says that I guess his intention he was writing it for children. So he almost titled it Aristotle for Children. But then he thought, oh, maybe adults could also benefit from it. So he changed the title to Aristotle for Everybody. But let me tell you, I found it difficult. So, I'm struggling through this children's book. Um, but even that I found useful. So, Aristotle for Everybody. Yeah, I think at this point it's even a free PDF download. Something else that I have found useful. And I would be curious to know like what strategy have you taken to study the trivium or to integrate it?
um, strategy. I think I my strategy is to uh, finish with getting things done
Ah,
first,
mm-hmm.
and be more organized in every way. And from once I do that, I would like to integrate the Trivium because I know part of it. Like I've read the intro about grammar, logic, and rhetoric. So I have I even have them open in my computer, like all the study guide about the Trivium. I think from Tridia and Hope I open one, and the other one, or maybe it's like a link from Jean O. Denning,
Mm-hmm.
study guide, something like that. So I have two guides, but I think they're the same.
Yeah, there's also the Trivium Binder, I think, by Jarrett Sanchez. That's also pretty good. Um,
Mm.
and anyway, I think what I discovered by accident, because I spent a lot of times like, what is this trivium, right? Like I understand grammar, logic, rhetoric, but how do you apply it, right? Like I want to see an example of how you apply it. And I guess, and then I thought I would just break it down into steps, right? So, okay, logic, I know where to get that, right? So, that's my dad. There's these books, Aristotle. Let me start reading about logic. And then rhetoric, I joined Toastmasters some while back. Because, like, these were specific things I could do. It's like, oh, let me join Toastmasters, and you practice giving speeches. Um, and I have found Toastmasters also to be useful to get um, past some of my shyness, because I tend to be shy.
Hmm.
And, I used to be very afraid to speak in public, and, but so I think it helped me with that, and that's the rhetoric part of it. And I think it's also helped me speak better. Um,
I have it on my things to like. Uh, I researched some about those masters here in Mexico City, and I
yep.
found really interesting groups. Not so far, but well, everything is far here in Mexico City when it comes to traffic. But
Yeah, no, that's great, man. I can actually, well, I only know one club, and I guess maybe they're all different, but I have taken a lot of value from it. Um, so, my son again, but my wife's taking care of it. In fact, I see a bicycle behind you. Do you get around on bike, or is that just
it's a painting.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, but I do like mountain bike.
Oh, okay.
I like doing that. I was a little bit into downhill, but I think it's really, really dangerous to do. Like, yeah. So I like better. I like mountain bike better.
I
Uh,
I recently got into that also. It's a lot of fun. Um, it's like like it's a lot of work to go uphill, but unlike jogging, there's kind of the coming down part is fun. You feel like you get something out of it. You climb, you bust your butt, but at least the downhill is fun. Whereas jogging, it's just work. It's just a little less work going downhill than uphill. But
well, it's kind of the same when I go hiking and I go mountain like biking because when I go downhill, I either run downhill like risking my life running like downhill and also with the bike. So I really enjoy both like hiking or going on a ride.
um, no, that's interesting. Yeah, it's fun stuff, and it looks like you like the outdoors, and I'm trying to get out there too. Um, yeah, it just exercise feels good.
Yeah.
So, well, something else I was curious about. What would you say the state of the philosophy of freedom in Mexico or Latin America? So, at least here, outside of Tragedy and Hope and maybe School Sucks podcast, I think for the general, I sound like a weirdo when I talk about stuff like this, like at Toastmasters, right? Like when I give a speech, it's always something that interests me. So it's almost always about to do with, the first ones were pretty trivial, like about fermenting or how I make sauerkraut or how I make yogurt. And then I was like, no, I'm just going to talk about what really interests me. So I started talking about, the philosophy of freedom. And here, I don't know. In Mexico, there's a similar history. I guess that's why I'm curious. Of fighting against, uh, outright tyranny and a bloody war against an empire, and Um, but I feel like in the United States, there's a lot of talk about freedom and liberty, but there's not a lot of thought behind what those words mean anymore. Um, so, anyway, but I'm curious. Like, are there any podcasts or people dedicated to these ideas of and let me back up a second too. I could be wrong, but I also get the sense that the idea that government is corrupt is more readily acceptable and accepted by Mexicans, the average Mexican, than the average American, right? Like I think that's a bigger threshold here. But I don't know if that necessarily translates to ideas about freedom. Maybe people in Mexico just think the Mexican government's corrupt, but maybe not all governments are corrupt. I don't. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think. all Mexicans know government is corrupt here in Mexico. Um, Depends on when you are, on where you are. Like one example is Oaxaca. They're known to be fighty people. Like they like their liberty. Let's say they don't like someone going there and imposing some rules of how they should live or if they should pay more taxes or things like that. So they stand like against the state every time they can. Like you always hear about that. Like or even I've seen it like when I'm traveling there. Like some of the toll uh, yeah on the highways where you pay toll. Some of them are taken by indigenous people and they let you go for free or things like that. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, I mean freedom per se. Like I think they might live also like in an illusion of they being free to do everything, but somehow they still control in many aspects. So, um, but I mean, I think they're open and lots of like probably I don't know. What I can see from my family is that they know it's corrupted, but I don't think they see the same way about other countries.
Right.
Uh, Probably just a little bit in the US, but uh, outside from there, they think it's uh, all nice. So,
You know, I don't know what you feel, what you think about this, but I was traveling through Argentina right for work. Actually, I ended up spending about a month in Argentina, and two things struck me. Right, first of all, how much Argentina looks like Mexico to me. Right,
mm,
you know, maybe it's really old. It looks like Spanish colonial and then modern, and anyway. So maybe part of it was the architecture, right? But the other thing was talking. I got to become friendly with a couple of Argentines that I was working with. You know, it was a group of them, and it sounded like Mexicans talking, right? So it was pretty common to hear Argentines saying stuff like, "Man, Argentina's got so many natural resources and all this natural beauty. If it wasn't for the Argentines, we would be like a wealthy country, you know."
yeah,
And it echoed something that I would hear a lot in Mexico, you know, about Mexicans talking about Mexico and Mexicans, right? And it just occurred to me like that's the worst thing that's happened. You know, it's like a lot of it's like the self doubt or the self blame, and you know, without realizing that maybe Mexicans don't really control what happens within this. You know, there's these international non governmental forces that play a bigger role in shaping what life looks like. You know, so it's not like some shortcoming in the Argentine people or in the Mexican people. You know. And then the other thing that struck me too is that supposedly Mexicans and Argentines don't get along, but it seems like man, we have a lot in common, more than just language, you know. Um,
yeah, like um, yeah, some Argentinians or Mexicans have their things, but I have found like many Argentinians to be really friendly and easygoing. So, um, but I think they see their country more like European style. I think. Uh,
it's hard to deny that I think there was more interracial intermingling in Mexico than in Argentina. Because that was the other weird thing, you know, like being in Argentina. At one point, we're at a dinner and everybody's getting kind of drunk, and I don't know how the topic came up, but it was a topic of ancestry. Pretty much everybody at that table was either Spanish or Italian or German or Swiss, you know.
okay.
And and then you know, like they were just going around the table. And when it came to me, I was like, I don't know, I'm probably part Aztec. I don't know, right? Kind of as a joke, but So there is this lack of, and I don't know. I didn't, I was working with this one group. I didn't try, I was in one town. I was just dealing with engineers, so I don't know what all of Argentina really looks like. But um, so there's been different patterns of immigration down there, I suppose. You know, whereas in Mexico, it seems like there was a lot of trade that was happening and a lot of intermingling. So even within my own family, man, there's like really dark people. I mean, they look like they're from India, or they look, there's very white people, right? They're completely blonde, right? It's like it runs the full gamut, really short and really tall, really short. So I don't know. At least I have the sense that we're very intermingled in Mexico. And then somewhere I read that like a lot of slaves were brought over from Africa, but unlike what happened in the United States, where people ended up kind of segregated ethnically, there was more intermarrying in Mexico, so that you know, almost every family has one incredibly dark, suspiciously dark person, and as a result of all of this. So,
Yeah.
and I don't know what that's due to, or what caused that. And obviously, there were a lot of immigrants from Western Europe. Um, so there's a lot of European-looking Mexicans too. But but I didn't see that in Argentina, or saw less of that in Argentina anyway. But everybody was cool, man. I had the same concern. I thought they may not like me. I was traveling with a bunch of Americans and then me. And, I'm still a Mexican citizen, so I'm walking around with my Mexican passport. And to get to the
Yeah.
building where we were working, we had to show our passport, right? So, I mean, like, plus I was speaking in Spanish, right? And obviously from the accent, they meet from a mile away, they knew I was Mexican. And everybody was really
Yeah.
cool. I mean, it was not an issue. So, but I thought it might be. I really thought they might not like me.
Probably if you speak about football.
Maybe it's a soccer thing.
Yeah.
Well, luckily, while I was there, and it was funny because while I was there were a couple of like important soccer matches. Argentina was playing again. I don't know, like it was another South America. They got a big rivalry with another South American country. I don't know. I don't know.
Boca Juniors versus someone.
Well, it was the national team versus another national team. So it was like Argentina versus Paraguay or something. Paraguay.
Okay.
And Argentina won, luckily, right? Because I thought they're going to be in a bad mood if Argentina loses. So while I'm here, uh, so, but that's true. I figured this rivalry might just be a soccer thing, than anything real. Um, so, and I think I didn't let you answer the question. So, in terms of like a freedom movement or philosophy, I mean, does it exist, or is it also not really very well known?
Well, I I really haven't researched about it. Like I'm spending. Well, I like what Richard has or James Corbett has, or I think they could be more advanced in those subjects, but I really haven't researched here in Mexico or something in Spanish. So I think it would be like a really nice thing to do. Like, well, I'm interested on doing. So s- I probably gonna do so just to see like where they at or what they're talking about. Because I've seen people in just a couple like in politics talking about critical thinking, like um, why the things are not gonna change if people are still doing the same thing and stuff like that. But um, other than that, like podcast and all that stuff, I haven't heard of anything.
Yeah, no, I mean it's rare also, here, and it's kind of a big world, right? The English speaking world, right? So it's not just Americans, right? James Corbett, is Canadian living in Japan and can be kind of international. So I figured Latin America is huge. It's massive, actually. It's a big place,
Hmm.
and there's a history there also of freedom. And there's a lot of champions of freedom, even just in Mexico, right? But I wonder to what extent that's been squashed or how much that legacy has been lost. Um, So I'm just curious, and I'm also interested. You know, it seems a little unfair. I think I mentioned to you last time we spoke yesterday. It seems a little unfair that unless you can read English, you don't have access to the documents that explain a little bit why the world works the way it works. You know,
Hmm.
so I always thought it would be a useful task to either translate or provide some of this information in Spanish. You know, and there's a huge market for it. I mean, from Mexico to Argentina, you know, and everything in between.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess Spain. No, it's not that big, but I think Mexico
But
City is about the size of Spain. And, you know,
the other day, someone told me, I think it was Chris McMillan, who told me there were a good podcast in Spain, people doing it in Spanish. So I haven't get into that yet, but it's part of my research about, yeah. But that's interesting. But what you tell me about translating, because I am almost since I encountered the content of Richard, I thought it would be a good idea to translate them, like for me to understand it better, and also, uh, yeah, so more people can access it.
yeah, man. I mean, when there's more time, I would love. That's an endeavor I would be interested also in helping you out with. My falling, and you heard me speaking Spanish yesterday. I
Yeah,
think it, my English might be stronger than my Spanish. So, um,
it's perfect Spanish.
I don't know. You know, I'll tell you, we did the test run, and I was listening to the playbacks. Like, I kind of have an accent there. Um, and then grammar, I felt. You know, I told you I went back to school. I don't know if I did, but at some point I was
Yeah.
like fed up with life in the United States. I was going to go back to Mexico, so I did. It was the equivalent to freshman year of high school, which would have been I said prepa, but it wasn't prepa. It was what comes before that, secundaria.
Secundaria.
Yeah, so yeah, well, I did a year there, but it was funny how I could speak it, I could understand it, especially after a year. But still, like grammar failed me. A lot of grammatical problems. A lot of misspellings. So my Spanish is probably like elementary school level. You know, I can probably write at an elementary school level. So I definitely can't. I can maybe do a first pass translation. You know, uh,
Okay.
but I definitely couldn't do it. So
Well,
yeah, maybe we can team up, or you know what would be fun too. I mean, just even having a discussion. You know, like we find a topic and we do
yeah,
a weekly call, and that could be a podcast. You know,
yeah, for sure.
so
That
thanks.
sounds interesting.
Yeah, no, man, I'm actually, I am serious. I'm a little, you know, bandwidth is low. Um, so, and you know, you brought up something that I was curious about. I guess I ask everybody, or we ask each other, like what effect autonomy has had, and it sounds like, you know, you're trying to integrate these higher learnings. Um, what about in your private life? I know we discussed, you know, you've got your business. We're getting to
Yeah.
a point where there's some specific business skills. That's what we're covering in the class. I wasn't expecting that. In fact, you know, I signed up for this class because I thought I was going to get class on the trivium. That's all I thought I was going to get.
Mhm.
Um, but how do you see your future? Do you see yourself working to get a lot of money, working to, you know, or how do you see yourself applying like some of these other skills in in your private life? And maybe you have. I mean, you know, there's a lot to think about. I don't know if that's really something that you've thought about.
Yeah, it's a big thing, but kind of like roughly what I like is to, yeah, to make good money, because I think it's something, well, you need in this society. So it's a survival tool, maybe. So yeah, definitely see myself making good money, but uh, I would like to use that money to like uh, I don't know, like well, with autonomy, I would like to use it to create some ground bases, or for me to take on my objectives or different life skills, or any subject that I'm interested, and to be able to, yeah, to gain some decent mastery on any of those subjects, so I can transmit more clearly to everyone I'm around, or I don't know, to create an impact on people so they can empower themselves.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm definitely into like trying to change the world to be a better place. So that be socially or ecologically. So those two aspects will be what I'd like to work on. So I'm I'm having trouble to put it into words, like, so I'm sorry about that.
No, no, no. It makes perfect sense, and it's interesting. I think the two things are related. You know, if it's gonna come up in the class, but I think I'd also had come to grips with it, or kind of come to realize this on my own, that if you know, if it's hard to, if you're broke, man, and you're just struggling, it's hard to do these other things that you want to do. So, like this podcast, I tell you, my goal right now is to get to the point where I don't have to work 40 hours a week like I do now, so I can have more
Yeah,
time to do the things that are meaningful. Um, so, like, yeah, help people, right? Spend be able to read more, and then spend more time with my kids, you know, and just have that energy to interact with them, and take on these projects that have meaning, right? Um,
yeah.
so no, I hear you, and that's great that you're thinking along these ways. Well, I wish I had. It's a good sign that you were rebellious in school. I was very obedient, which means that I was late to the game. You know, I was really thinking. I really wanted, boy, I wanted to be a good employee, you know, and be very obedient because that's what I was told was the way to be successful. But well, that's not the case. So
Yeah, and luckily for me, one of a good friend of mine, we start working on some outsourcing, and from there I close a couple of deals, and they still give me some money, so that has allowed me to have uh, more time. So I'm making good money. Like, it's not a great money, but it's good money. And yeah, I like that I have time to do the things I like, because working on that I do not like. So
what did you outsource, or what's
it
the nature?
was the payrolling. So yeah, I think it's called in English the payroll of a business.
Mm-hmm.
So um, there were a lot of other services along the payroll administration. So yeah, it was like just finding the clients, having interviews with them, or yeah, trying to sell them why we were better than the others, and luckily we had better products, so it was easier to sell, I think. So yeah, I was lucky to close those deals and to be part of that just for a few moments of my life, because that has given me the liberty to travel and to do the things I like without worrying about money.
That's phenomenal, man. That's awesome. So, and this happened during the autonomy class, or is this before the autonomy class?
Before the autonomy class.
Well, just
Yeah,
imagine now, man.
yeah.
You've had a chance to practice and learn more about this stuff.
Yeah, but it's a subject I really don't enjoy. Also, the people that I will like, that I will have to speak with, it's people who I don't enjoy talking. I know I know I can't put a stop on talking to those kind of people, but um, yeah, if I can avoid it and do money like with the things I like, uh, it will be a better use of my time.
Yeah, for sure. Well, either way, I'm impressed, man. Good for you. Um, so I guess we're right at about an hour. Um, yeah, this was a lot of fun, Federico. This is really cool. I'm gonna send you some of that info I mentioned that my dad has shared with me, and I'll probably be asking
Yeah,
for some tips on where to go
sure,
next time. We're in Mexico City, and yeah, I had a lot of fun.
for sure. I had a lot of fun too, man.
I'm glad. I'm glad, man. All right. Well, you have a good night, and I'll see you on the Discord server, right?
Sure, man. Good night.
Good night, Federico.
Bye.
Ciao.